Welcome back. Another episode of Asheville Real Estate News as we continue our coverage on the elections here. Today we sat down with Joey Osborne and a really good conversation, great business background, and just fun to talk with him about how that's going to apply in the political world. So take a listen. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to tell your friends that we are covering the elections as best as we can here at Asheville Real Estate News. Like, share, subscribe. Would be much appreciated. Tune in and see you guys in the next one. Joey, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here and hear a little bit about your life and why you decided to run. So thank you for being here today.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think great starting place for this conversation, at least, is be always interested to know what happened or what was the thought process between, previous life and then got to run, go public.
Why would anybody want to go public?
Yeah,
right? Yeah. It's good. No, it's a super question. So I'll have to admit, I've always been politically inclined. From 8 years old, I've been one way or another involved in politics, but certainly never at the level that I ran for office. Right. I think I used to hallucinate and imagine myself being president when I was like 12 years old, but I pretty quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. But, like everybody else, you get caught up in the need to make a living and work and do that sort of thing. So with that, I kind of kept my eye on politics for 59 years old now, so that's been 50 years or so. But just in the last 5-6 years, I've really started to think about the need. Certainly there's an obvious need out there in the political world, at least from most folks' perspective, that we have problems in D.C., federal government, and probably all levels of government. So, again, fortunately, after all these years, I've been now sort of in a position that I can do things that I want to do and get involved, and I just decided it was Congress was the thing to take a shot. And I'd been thinking about it actually for a couple of years, 3 years, pretty seriously. And then when Representative Meadows decided to retire, it was a perfect storm was created. So I dashed over to Raleigh and 12 hours before the deadline and filed, and then came home and asked my wife for permission to run. I'd invested, I think, $1,700 for the filing fee. So I thought I've made worse decisions before. So anyway, that's what got me there, the short version of what got me there.
Was that a little bit of a last-minute decision then? You said it was 12 hours before the deadline, or was it just you decided and you're like, I'm going to do it, and I was like, I got to just go now?
Yeah, so it was a combination of both. As I said, I had been concerned about the direction of government for a good many years now, and seeing the hyper-partisanship, and really very frustrated with that. Even though I'm a partisan, it's still, I think both sides of the table have some fault to bear and some blame to bear for that. So, but then, when the opportunity opened up, it was very much last minute, because it's a big commitment. It's a big financial commitment. It's a big personal and family commitment. So everybody has to be on board. But again, timing is good in my life, so I can afford to do it. Family is cooperative, at least in the short run, to let me do. If I go to Washington, spend maybe 4 years or so, and I think it's a good amount of time for anybody to be there.
Yeah, it's a long run, isn't it? Pretty much, it's like a November to November, give or so timeline. Has there been anything that maybe has surprised you once you kind of gotten into the campaigning?
It's been a fascinating learning experience of being a lifelong learner and just intrigued by processes as much as anything else. And I know you, being an entrepreneur, can understand that. Sometimes it's the doing of the thing is more important than the accomplishment of the thing, right?
Wholeheartedly. Getting into those processes and the nuts and bolts can sometimes be just as exciting or more exciting than the end product or result that comes of it. It's where the slippery slope sometimes to get too distracted in that, though.
Yep. No, it can happen. But it's always good to have a partner, somebody on board who can say, no, we need to think about how we're going to monetize this thing. But to your point about the about the whole thing of the election process. What was the question? Remind me the question. I'm sorry.
I was just, is there's any expectations that you had going into it?
What did I learn?
Like, what has something surprised you?
Yeah. Being a lifelong learner. I mean, it's just really, really intriguing. I went to part of the thing that my campaign team had me do early on was make a visit to D.C. I talk about myself being a political outsider, and honestly, this trip 3 weeks ago was only my third trip ever to D.C. I went once when I was 12. My wife and I went a couple years ago for a long weekend. But this was my third and only trip, but it was to meet with potential folks who invest in campaigns, lobbyists as there. And I had a blast with those folks. I met with like 30 of them. First of all, two things. The big takeaway was that they're not as bad a people as they're made out to be. Sure, they have money, and that's what they do is they support candidates. But they're also very, very knowledgeable about their fields. I met with folks, very diverse group of people. Verizon, the wireless industry was there represented, the agricultural industry, and there's some very, very, very strong American folks. They're just good people. So that was very interesting and intriguing process. But another big thing now with campaigns, and there's no secret knowledge. Everything's digital. So yard signs are great. Television's okay, but the big thing is having a big list and knowing how they've behaved in the past, and so a big part of our campaign is digital.
Is that something you knew going into it?
No, it was a total surprise.
The digital component of it?
Yeah, no, it was a total surprise as to how much sophistication there is there, and it goes back to, I think, in terms of presidency, President Obama had a fairly strong
one,
he had maybe the initial piece with that. Then with the Trump campaign, Brad Parscale, big digital guy, and he's now the campaign manager. So it's all about digital. It's so economical and manageable to get in front of the right people.
Going back to something you referenced a couple of times, and just this is where I'm personally a lot more curious, honestly, than the politics is just you've mentioned being in a position where you can kind of do this and kind of go all in and be at peace with that. So what were you doing beforehand, and what led you to a place where you could kind of go into this and feel really good about the time, money, family support, et cetera? Yeah,
good question. And better question is, what haven't I done in 50 years as an entrepreneur? And I think you could probably
relate. Is that the shorter
answer? Yeah. But no, the shorter answer is probably what have I been doing lately. And I've been in the mosquito control business for the last 15 years. Again, lifelong entrepreneur, and I literally have tried a little bit of everything, and I've had way more failures than successes. But luckily, we found a big success with the mosquito control niche, getting into it really when it was just starting. We do what we call backyard mosquito control, very simple, deliverable process that eliminates mosquitoes in people's backyards. So did it for about 5 years on a local level at home. And then at about the 5-year point, I realized, wow, this is really got some potential and I need to expand it. So I launched a franchise model around that. So for the last 11 years, we've been pushing the franchising piece of that. And we've had a lot of success. We're in 430 or 40 locations, 38 states. We have about 500 employees across the company and fast growing, and so it's been good. So that's what's enabled me, freed me up to do this. And like you're hitting on, more important to me, the political angle is great, and I do think that we have to have more business-minded, entrepreneurial-minded people in D.C. But energy for me comes from all this mechanical stuff, all this stuff that's going on with the campaign. And so I love the idea of term limits because about 4 or 6 years is about the point where I'm ready to move on to something else anyway. So it's
the creative bug seeps back in.
It does, it does.
Time to keep exploring.
Exactly. But the one thing about being in Congress, as I see it, is there's something new every day. There's a new challenge every day, and we need innovative thinkers. I spoke to some folks last night, and I said, when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think with these career politicians, every problem looks like a new piece of legislation to them, or a new tax, or a new whatever the government folks tend to do. And I think that there's a different approach to take toward that.
So 2 questions. You can answer them in whatever order you'd want to. I think that right now, at least from the outside, and curious to know if you've had a little bit of a closer look now, is there's obviously a lot of bad blood, it feels like, on both sides of the aisle. And is it something that you can repair those bridges and kind of get back to a place where it was a more constructive place to work and make things happen.
Yeah, good. I think so, and I think it has to happen, or we're in big trouble if it doesn't. There's I don't know if you're familiar with the Federalist Papers or not, but James Madison and Hamilton and Jay, when they were trying to sell the country on the new Constitution, they wrote these 85 papers. They're called the Federalist Papers. Federalist number 10 was written mostly by Madison, or all by Madison, in 1787, November of 1787. And in Federalist 10, he wrote that his biggest fear, his biggest concern was for the future of the Constitution, that was that the country would become, or Congress actually would become, so hyperpartisan and entrenched in hyperpartisan politics, factions as he described it, that our system of checks and balances would cease to function. And that's exactly, to your point, where we are now. There is so much divide, so much hyperpartisanship that first of all, really nothing good's getting done, because everything is along party lines, which is unfortunate. But then we have the executive branch making executive decisions using that authority that comes with that. We have Congress all tied up, so there's another piece of the checks and balances that's not working. Then we have judges on both sides that are legislating from the bench. So it's a bad situation. But to your point, I think it's solvable. One thing is, I think the hyper divide that's there, the hyper partisanship, at some point in time, the voters, and this is Madison. Madison also offered a solution in Federalist 10. He said the voters will be smart enough to elect these folks out and get people in who are thoughtful and people who are willing to put America over politics. So that's my hope, and that's my message, and my theme for running is, let's end this hyper partisan divide. There's some issues that we all have and share on both sides that we could be addressing, and we're not, because nobody wants to give the other side a win.
Yeah, it's it seems like there's a lot of work to mend those bridges. There
is. But again, I think that there are enough folks out there who will say, "All right, we've had it. Let's sit down. Let's all gather around the table."
There's a lot of different, I spent a little bit of time on your website getting familiar with, a lot of the different issues, and it would take all afternoon to kind of go through all of them in depth. So I figured I'd give you the opportunity to maybe talk about the ones that are personally, the ones that are either the most important or that you're the most excited about working on,
Well, good. Thank you.
And what would they be and why?
Yeah, super question. Top of the list, I'm a strong conservative, so I'd never compromise my core conservative beliefs. I'm very much pro-life. I'm pro-Second Amendment. I'm a big fan of Donald Trump. I don't love everything Donald Trump has done, but I love what he's done for the economy, and I think that he's the right president at the right time. So all of that's big. That's big to me. But the big issues that I want to concentrate on in Congress are those that we can bring both sides to the table together. We have immigration. There's mutual benefit from both Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated too. And I feel like independent and unaffiliated voters the system's been stacked against them. And I really look forward to bringing those folks, because it's about 30% or so, right, of the electorate.
A lot of people that I know fall into that camp.
Yeah, they really do. And they don't have a voice. Not a legitimate voice, and that's just very unfortunate. So I look forward to bringing those folks on these issues. Though immigration is a big one. Healthcare reform is huge. Everybody wants to address that. So I think there's opportunities there.
Yeah, the healthcare one, it's very relevant, I think, right now, at least for people in Asheville. I'm not sure if you're aware of, I'm sure you are, with everything that's been happening over at Mission Health, and I think it's that whole balance between how much oversight and how much independence you should have. And typically, personally, I think that a lot of times you get the independence, you get the creativity and the ingenuity to make things happen. But I don't know anything about healthcare, so I don't even know if that's a feasible approach, or how do we address the healthcare
and I'm not issues. And I'm certainly not an expert in that field either. But what I do believe, and I've seen historically happen, is when the private sector can be involved with some regulation. You have to keep an eye on things. It's the situation's far better. Government tends to mess up everything that it touches. If you look at the institutions that the federal government runs, they're all bankrupt, honestly. So, so I'd say number one, let's get the federal government out of the situation as much as we can, and let's get the private sector involved and let them compete and let them fill those needs with funds other than taxpayer funds too, right? So there's no need we take the private sector out, but then we've got to come in with funding to offset that. So I'm a big private sector guy.
When you've been on the campaign trail, has there been a certain question or an issue that people have brought to you that's been a common theme, or has it kind of been all over the place?
No, there's a very common theme. It's exactly what you've brought up. Everybody's concerned about hyperpartisanship, the fact that Washington gets nothing done but squabbling politically back and forth. It's very frustrating to them. And I touched on probably the biggest one right now is health care. No one, I think, has, well, probably some folks do, but we personally, as an entrepreneur, we pay $1,200 or $1,300 a month for an insurance policy that has a $5,000 deductible. So there's no real benefit, unless some catastrophic thing happens. But no, that's the recurring theme. Right now, the recurring theme is how do we stop this craziness that's getting nothing done, and where we have politicians, both sides of the aisle, putting their own personal agendas over that of the country.
It's a really crowded field.
Yeah.
Did you anticipate that?
No. So actually, it's funny because with Mark Meadows retiring last second. So I thought two things. I thought I'm either going to be the only guy that gets to Raleigh in time, or there's going to be
a lot of people.
And this latter was the case. So there were 12 at the start. So I wasn't surprised by it, and at first I was a little bit discouraged by it. But not being a political savvy guy, I didn't think about it initially, but it's turned out to be I would call it a perfect storm for the 11 of us, because we all have very little name recognition, and because of the way the primary is structured in North Carolina, you have to get 30% plus one vote to avoid a runoff, and there's a pretty big likelihood that there will be a runoff. So, and we're pretty comfortable and hopeful that we're in the position to be one of those two.
When you look at everybody else who's in the field, what do you think makes you stand out from everybody else? Is there a defining characteristic, a viewpoint, or is it multiple? Yeah,
first of all, there's all 11 candidates that are left. All 12 were great. I've gotten to know all of them very well, fairly well, some very well. Super group, and absolutely the Republicans can't go wrong with any of the 11 of us. I think maybe what does make me stand out more is with the business background that I have, and there are some other business guys too, but a combination of the business background that I have, a really pure conservative set of values, and maybe more than anything, I think this is the number one thing, is the ability to bring both sides together and to hopefully appeal. I think I can appeal to independents and unaffiliated voters maybe more than the rest of the crowd, just by recognizing their perspective, and thirdly, maybe, or fourthly, I don't need the job, so I'm totally unbeholden. I have no endorsements. I'm totally self-funding my campaign, so I'm not beholden to anyone. So I believe that uniquely among our group positions me to go to D.C. and not. I don't need to have my picture.
Not to pay back any favors.
I don't need to pay back any favors. I don't need to have my picture taken with the president. I don't need to be on Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow. I just need to serve the people of Western North Carolina. So I think that positions me for that.
So this is a little bit of a different question, or maybe a different question, but a question. I don't want to mess the question up, and so bear with me if I stumble through it, as I already am. You mentioned the bipartisan and being able to bridge that gap, and then you also mentioned, you very much support President Trump. It feels like there's oftentimes, if you're very vocal about President Trump in Washington, then it kind of automatically alienates you, and vice versa. If you don't support him, then people don't want to. And so how do you show support for the president and then also bridge that gap and be like, hey, like, just because I'm supporting the president doesn't mean I don't want to talk to you. Like, how do you reconcile those two
I'm pretty
viewpoints?
sure I'll be able to convince him to turn his Twitter account off. So that's I'm banking on that. If I could pull that one off, then we have it.
I think that would be an amazing feat. I don't know how that would ever be accomplished.
I got to feel that others have tried. Probably more influential folks than me have tried that one. So no, it is a very good question, and it's a tough one. But the way I look at it is, I describe President Trump as being nothing short of divine intervention for conservative causes and values, and he is that because of his political outsider nature and just his egotistical nature, whatever it is. He doesn't cower down to anything or anybody. And I'm yet to find a value or something that he's pushed forward that is not America first. He goes after Republicans too, not as much as he does Democrats. But if you cross him wherever you are, and I'm not saying you're crossing him. When you cross him, you cross America. And so because of that, I'm very, very much a supporter of his. But I'll follow that up with where you were headed with that. There's a time for that, and then there's a time for unity. And I think that we're going to see more of that in his second term, more of that unification piece. But a lot of it's going to depend on what the Democrats choose to do. If they're going to continue to go after him, especially over these things that have obviously proven, at least through the legal process, to not be valid, he's going to fight back. So it takes both sides. So I want to be probably 4 years ahead of when we're going to start to see this unification. I think that I think President Trump will win in 2020 without any trouble. But I think whoever the next guy or girl or lady or gentleman is we're going to see a change, a shift. But by that point in time, as a conservative, we will have locked down the true, pure conservative values that I think this country's built on, and it needs to, for it to survive, we need to continue to enhance and enforce.
So there could be so many places to go with that. So I'm going to keep it simple as, have you been on this campaign trail? Do you feel that people are looking for that? Or has there been a feel that people are more still wanting to, like, I know you said the bipartisan was important, but has that been more important than supporting President Trump, or has it kind of gone both ways?
Yeah, I see it. Of course, I'm in front of conservatives, and this is a refreshing, this is like a safe space here to be where I've, being on the campaign trail as a Republican, I'm in front of conservatives all the time. So I can't honestly say what the feel is specifically, but I do know that America is, we're not a socialist country. I mean, we may be 20, 40, 60 years, but we're still, the majority of folks are pragmatic moderates. And I think that that's going to be the message that has to pull everybody back together. We're not going to pull the left in. We're not going to pull the far right in. But there's a moderate middle ground. And I'm telling you, these independents and unaffiliated make up this 30% of them, of the group. And obviously you have some fringe people in that group. So I think I know there's hope.
Right. Well, let me tie it together with just a couple questions. Looking back at your experience running businesses, have you ever been in a situation that you feel like you can draw on to help bridge two different parties who have had a lot of animosity, and maybe share a story or a thought process about how you approach that? Yeah,
it's really good. So, I haven't specifically thought about that, but one comes to mind immediately as a franchisor. I'm currently in a space where I have franchisees, and there's 150 of those, and they all have their groups with them. So there are probably 200 or 300 people. And really the similarity is that we're all working for the same thing, just like all Americans want pretty much the same things. These franchisees want the same things, but they all have different ways of wanting to get it done. And fortunately for me, I'm the boss. I can say how it's going to be done, but doesn't mean I can do that from a dictatorial kind of standpoint, right? So I think that's the relationship. I know to accomplish things, you got to be open. You got to listen. Being maybe a better analogy is staying married, right? So, and having a family that's unified and happy to be around each other. And you can't run a family like government's being run. You certainly can't run a business like that. So if I have a board of directors, if we were split 50-50 and we were constantly competing against each other, business is going to fail. So that's what we're seeing. But I believe bringing, to answer your question, bringing my business background and some life skills that you learn in 60 years. If I were 30 years old, 35 years old even, I didn't have the maturity at that point to be able to step into this role and try to be the peacemaker. At the same time maintaining my core values. It's not going to be an easy process, but putting America over politics has got to be job one, and that's where I'm relying on. There are enough people out there who share that value to be able to say, all right, politics are one thing, but let's
focus on what we all say we want.
Yeah, exactly. One quick story along those lines. My grandmother, in the 1960s, was, first of all, she was lifelong conservative, never always voted for Republicans until 1960s, and I was born in 60, and so when I became aware, maybe 1965, 1968, she was a big fan of the Kennedys. She loved JFK and she loved Robert Kennedy. And I learned later they were Democrats. And one day, maybe when I was 10 or 12, I finally realized, I went to her and I said, why is it that you like these guys are Democrats? And she pulled me aside and she said something I've never forgotten. She said, there comes a time sometime when you have to step away from politics and do the right thing. And she knew there were some core values that the Kennedys held. They would be conservatives nowadays, but that she really liked. So I resonate back to that story from my grandma Pearl. Her name was Pearl. So sometimes you have to step away from politics to do the right thing. And that's what I'm willing to do, and I hope enough other people are.
Well, if somebody just heard this conversation and it really resonated with them, they liked what you had to say, how do they get contacted with you to get involved or learn more about you? Yeah,
thank you. So joeyosborne.com is the website. That's the best way. The contact form's there, and there's my political background, and there's some philosophical things there too. So yeah, I'd appreciate any interest. I'm happy to speak to anybody and everybody.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Selfish question here. It's non-political, but what I always ask, I'm starting my entrepreneurial journey. There's a lot of people kind of who might fit that, who listen in as well. Any words of advice for somebody who's done it for so long?
I appreciate you asking. The one thing that if I have a regret about the way I've behaved as an entrepreneur over, again, 50 years, is not sticking with something. I've jumped from thing to thing to thing, and the beauty of this mosquito control business, this franchise model that I'm in now, it has a recurring revenue stream. People keep paying me every year, so it's sort of made me stick with it. So I would say pick something. I used to cut grass when I was 8 or 9 years old and make $5 a job. And if I had done nothing but stayed with that, and I dropped out of high school at 16, I'm probably gonna get in trouble here. But I never went to college. I just kept growing. I would be the largest grass mowing company in the United States. So pick something and something you love, though. It's got to be something you look forward to getting out of bed to do every day, and just stick with it and just don't stop, because there are going to be ups and downs, but just keep pounding away. It's what I tell my kids.
Well, appreciate it. That's a good insight. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this conversation, you can learn more about Joey, joeyosborne.com. We'll have all that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck. And, hopefully we can have another conversation leading up to November.
I'd love to come back. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, you guys. As a reminder, this whole week, and I think probably 2 weeks, we are having conversations with everybody who's running for office. So keep checking back in or learn more about any of the candidates at avialrealestatenews.com. See you all next one.